You know that feeling, right? That kind of warm, maybe a little wistful pull towards the past. Nostalgia.
It's pretty universal.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels really comforting, like a warm blanket, but other times maybe a bit sad. A reminder of what's gone.
Definitely can be both.
So today on the deep dive, we're going to really get into the science of it. We've got this review that pulls together stuff from cognitive neuroscience, evolutionary psychology.
Yeah, it tries to connect the dots on why we feel it.
Exactly. And it also looks at whether keeping our minds active, lifelong learning, might actually change how much we feel that pull to the past.
It's a fascinating synthesis of different fields, really.
It is, and it leads to this question that I bet a lot of you listening have wondered about too. Can we, assume that people who really exercise their brains, intellectually speaking, are maybe less nostalgic?
It's an interesting hypothesis. If being more engaged now mean you dwell less on them?
Right. So that's what we'll explore. We'll look at the evolutionary angle, what's firing in the brain, and how this whole idea of lifelong learning might fit in.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe with how our view of nostalgia has changed, because it wasn't always seen this way.
Good point. The sources mentioned it used to be seen pretty negatively, right?
Oh, absolutely. Historically, it wasn't this kind of gentle feeling. It was often described as really quite debilitating, like a severe homesickness.
He called it algos, meaning pain.
Exactly. Pain. It was even considered a genuine medical disorder, especially, for soldiers or people far from home. A serious condition.
Wow. From a medical disorder to something we often kind of enjoy now, that's a huge shift.
It really is.
So what happened? Why the change? What's the evolutionary psychology take on why we even have this capacity?
Well, the modern view, looking through that evolutionary lens, is that nostalgia actually evolved because it serves some really important adaptive functions.
Adaptive, like it helped us survive somehow.
In a way, yeah. Think about early human groups. Nostalgia, by bringing up these shared memories, these sort of cultural touch points, it would have been a powerful way to strengthen those social bonds.
Ah, okay, like a social glue.
Precisely.
Right.
If you were feeling isolated or things were changing fast, remembering those shared connections could reaffirm your place in the group, your collective identity.
So remembering good times together made the group stronger.
That's the idea. And some research have mentioned, I think it was McAndrew's work, suggests that recalling those key formative times, like high school maybe,
Yeah.
that actually gave an edge. Those memories served as psychological anchors. They help people navigate changes, challenges, remembering belonging, cooperation. It probably encouraged more of it.
So it's like a mental comfort blanket, but one that also subtly nudged you towards group survival behaviors.
You could say that, yeah.
And the review also mentions the reminiscence bump. What's that about?
Right, the reminiscence bump. It's a tendency we have where our strongest, most vivid memories, the ones that often trigger nostalgia, they tend to come from a specific period, roughly ages 10 to 30.
Why then?
Well, evolutionarily speaking, that's a critical time for figuring out who you are, building social connections, forming partnerships, finding your place in the community.
All the big life stuff.
Exactly. Stuff with real survival implications. So it makes sense that memories from that intense period of identity formation and social interaction would be particularly strong and easily recalled. It's like an evolutionary spotlight on those crucial years.
Okay, so our most potent nostalgia is often tied to when we were figuring ourselves and our social world out. Makes sense. But you said earlier it can be bittersweet. It's not all warm fuzzies.
No, definitely not always. There's often that underlying awareness, isn't there? That the past you're remembering is, well, past. It's different now.
Yeah, that little pang.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, that duality kind of works. The comfort reinforces the value of those past connections, those good feelings. But the bittersweet part, that acknowledges change. Maybe it even motivates us to seek similar positive things now.
Ah, so it's a trade-off. Comfort versus the reality of time passing.
A really interesting evolutionary trade-off, yeah.
Okay, so it's complex, rooted in our evolution. Let's shift gears a bit. What's happening inside our heads and the brain when we get hit with nostalgia?
Right, the neuroscience. It's definitely more than just a feeling. There's specific brain activity. The review points to a few key areas working together.
Like what?
Well, first you've got the amygdala. That's heavily involved in processing emotions, often very quickly.
The emotional core.
Yeah. Then there's the hippocampus, which is absolutely vital for memory, consolidating memories, retrieving those specific autobiographical details that make up the nostalgic scene in your mind.
Memory headquarters. Okay.
And then, critically, the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
The front part of the brain.
Exactly. That's involved in higher level stuff,
Hmm.
regulating emotions, decision making, and importantly here, linking those past memories to maybe how we think about the future.
So emotion, memory, and regulation all talking to each other.
It's a network, definitely. And the review mentions that if the PFC, that regulatory part, is damaged or not working optimally,
Uh-huh.
it can throw off the balance. The raw emotion of the memory might not be properly contextualized or managed, potentially leading to that more overwhelming, distressing kind of nostalgia we talked about earlier.
Interesting. So the PFC is like a filter, maybe a conductor for the nostalgia orchestra.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, it does manage the intensity and meaning.
And the review calls nostalgic recollection cognitive reconstruction. What does that mean? Are we changing our memories?
It doesn't mean we're just fabricating things, but it does mean we're not just playing back a perfect video recording.
Okay.
Our brain is actively reconstructing that memory. It selects certain details, maybe emphasizes the positive aspects, perhaps smooths over some rough edges.
Idealizing it a bit?
Often, yeah. It's about weaving that memory into a narrative about ourselves that feels coherent and generally positive.
Yeah.
It involves both the bottom-up emotional kick from the memory itself and the top-down cognitive processing from areas like the PFC, shaping how we interpret and feel about it now.
So we're sort of curating our own past to make sense of our present self.
In a way, yes. It's an active process.
And what about triggers? We all know music is a huge one. How does that fit neuroscientifically?
Music is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It seems to have a more direct line to our emotional and memory centers.
Like a shortcut.
Almost, yeah. The review notes that music-evoked nostalgia can really boost well-being because it efficiently reactivates those autobiographical memories and the associated feelings. It engages those circuits very effectively.
Which explains why it works so well sometimes in dementia care.
Exactly. Even when other memory pathways are impaired, music can sometimes unlock those stored memories and emotions, improving mood and even engagement. It highlights how potent sensory input can be.
Amazing how a few notes can do that. Okay, so let's look at how we use nostalgia. The review talks about it being an adaptive tool, not just something that happens to us.
Right. This is where the modern perspective really shines. It's seen less as a problem and more as a psychological resource.
How so?
Well, one key function is as an emotional buffer
A buffer against what?
against negative feelings like stress, anxiety, maybe loneliness. When you're feeling down, dipping into a positive nostalgic memory can genuinely lift your mood. It provides perspective, reminds you of good times, reinforces your sense of self-worth.
Like drawing on a reserve of past positive energy.
That's a good way to think about it. It helps regulate your current mood.
And it also helps with social connection.
Hugely important, yes. Recalling shared past experiences, thinking about important past relationships, it reinforces our sense of belonging.
Even if those people aren't around now.
Yes. It can bridge feelings of current isolation by reminding you of your network, your history of connection. And think about group nostalgia, shared cultural memories, historical events that really solidifies group identity.
And this is useful clinically, too. You mentioned dementia.
Definitely. Because those triggers, like music or old photos, can tap into preserved memories and positive emotions. They're used therapeutically.
To help with mood.
Mood, yes, but also sometimes memory recalls itself and encouraging social interaction.
Yeah.
It shows we can actually harness nostalgia constructively.
Fascinating. Okay, so nostalgia has benefits. Now let's connect this to our big question.
Mm-hmm.
Lifelong learning. How does keeping the mind active potentially change this whole picture?
Right. This is the crux of it. Lifelong learning, constantly challenging your brain, learning new things.
Yeah.
This is known to boost something called neural plasticity.
The brain's ability to change and rewire itself.
Exactly, forming new connections.
Yeah.
And it also builds up cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve.
Hmm.
What's that, like brain savings?
Sort of. It's the brain's resilience, its ability to cope with damage or decline, like from aging, by using alternative pathways or strategies it's built up through experience and learning.
So activities like reading, learning skills, puzzles, they build this reserve.
Yes, strongly associated with it. Studies show these activities are linked to reduced dementia risk, better brain health overall. You're essentially strengthening the brain's infrastructure.
Okay, so plasticity is the rewiring, reserve is the backup system. How does that link back to nostalgia?
Well, that neuroplasticity, that ability to adapt and form new connections, isn't just for learning new skills. It might also influence how we integrate our past experiences with our present.
Meaning?
Meaning someone with high plasticity who's actively learning might be better at weaving past memories into their current life without getting stuck there.
Yeah.
They're constantly updating their mental landscape.
And what about cognitive flexibility? That was mentioned too.
Right. Cognitive flexibility is your mental agility, the ability to switch thinking patterns, adapt your mindset.
Like being less rigid mentally.
Exactly. And lifelong learning enhances this. Constantly tackling new problems makes you more flexible. This flexibility could act as a buffer against getting stuck in negative emotions, including perhaps excessive or unhelpful nostalgia.
Because you can shift perspective more easily.
Precisely. You're better equipped to reframe things, including memories, and less likely to just dwell on them in one fixed, maybe negative way.
Okay, this is all starting to connect. Lifelong learning boosts reserve, plasticity, flexibility. So, how does this directly impact nostalgia, according to the review? Does it actually make people less nostalgic?
The hypothesis presented is that lifelong learners might experience less of the maladaptive kind of nostalgia, the kind that keeps you stuck.
Why?
Several potential reasons. One, they simply have richer, more engaging present lives to focus on, more anchors in the now.
Less need to look back for fulfillment.
Possibly. Two, that enhanced plasticity and flexibility give them other ways to manage emotions and feel good about themselves, reducing reliance on past glories, so to speak.
So, less nostalgic vulnerability, as the review puts it.
That's the term used, yeah. If you're constantly taking in new information, building new skills, maybe the need to lean heavily on the comfort of the static past decreases.
And it also changes how you see the past itself.
It could. Lifelong learning encourages viewing the past through the lens of ongoing growth. Memories aren't just finished chapters, they're data points on a continuing journey. It fosters a more adaptive nostalgia, where the past informs the present and future.
So, integrating it, not just revisiting it, is there actual evidence backing this up?
Well, there's indirect evidence. For instance, studies showing cognitive engagement protects against Alzheimer's suggest an active brain is more resilient overall.
Okay.
And direct nostalgia research using tools like the Southampton Nostalgia Scale finds that when people actively and deliberately engage with nostalgic thoughts, it's linked to better outcomes, improved mood, social connection.
So, it's not the nostalgia itself, but how you engage with it. And being cognitively active might promote a healthier engagement.
That seems to be the implication. It's
Yes.
less about eliminating nostalgia and more about channeling it constructively. Lifelong learning might foster reflection rather than just wistfulness.
Making it part of a forward look, not just a backward glance.
Exactly. Using those memories as fuel or insight rather than just an escape.
And the examples like music for Alzheimer's tie back in.
Yeah, they show the power of triggers, but also hint at the importance of engagement. The music prompts memory, but the therapeutic benefit comes from the engagement it enables. Similarly, those nostalgia inventories show active processing leads to benefits.
And the cognitive reserve studies.
They show that intellectual engagement builds that buffer, slowing decline. While not directly measuring nostalgia, a more resilient brain is likely to handle emotional memories differently, perhaps less intensely or less negatively.
And those integrated studies combining cognitive training and sensory stuff like music.
They really highlight the synergy. Keeping the brain active and engaging positive emotional memories seems to have combined benefits for mood and connection. It all points towards an active, engaged brain, potentially having a healthier relationship with the past.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. What's the main takeaway here?
I think the key points are: nostalgia is complex, with evolutionary roots and specific brain activity behind it. It serves real purposes, socially and emotionally. And lifelong learning seems to build a more resilient, flexible brain. This cognitive resilience likely influences how we experience nostalgia, perhaps reducing the need for the maladaptive kind, the kind that makes us feel stuck.
By keeping us more grounded in the present and looking forward.
Exactly. A more engaged mind might process those past memories differently.
So, back to that original question. Can we definitively say active learners are less nostalgic?
Less might be too simple. The evidence doesn't necessarily point to less frequent nostalgia, but perhaps a different quality of nostalgia. Less intense, less likely to be purely negative or wistful, maybe more reflective and integrated.
So, not a straightforward yes, but a strong suggestion that exercising your brain leads to better emotional regulation, which includes how you handle nostalgia.
I think that's a fair summary. It's not about ditching the past, but integrating it into a life that's still actively unfolding.
Which leads to a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah, maybe consider your own life. Think about times you've been really absorbed in learning something new, or deeply engaged in a project.
Uh-huh.
During those times, did you find yourself less prone to those intense waves of nostalgic longing? Does being really active in the present change how you relate to your past?
It's definitely something to reflect on, how your own engagement with now shapes your view of then.
Absolutely. And if this sparked your interest, there's tons more research out there on neuroplasticity, cognitive reserve, the benefits of learning, and all the different facets of nostalgia itself.
Great stuff to explore. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.